It's the Democrat Party that's messing us up. After 50 years of Democrat rule, isn't it time for a change? Isn't it time to stop listening to the Sentinel Journal that's run by a bunch of racists that don't report the truth? That's right, I said that, Sentinel Journal. You don't report the truth. You have a Democrat agenda. You're a bunch of socialists, and you don't care about our Constitution. So we don't care about voting for the candidates that you want us to vote for anymore. We don't take you seriously. Don't believe a word you report. You might as well be a tabloid. And that's all I got to say about you. Now go somewhere and hide, because you got your degrees from a gumball machine or maybe a Cracker Jack box. But you sure are failed reporters, and you might as well give it up supporting Kloppenburg, which is supporting abortion in manner of black neighborhoods. A racist. That's right, I said it. A racist. Kloppenburg hates black people because she wants black people to be exterminated through abortion.
Justice Kloppenburg also allowed a pedophile, a man who abused a little girl, to get out of jail early and gave Wisconsin pedophiles less jail time. And she's such a weak judge that she allowed criminals and felons to go and return back on the streets to kill more Wisconsinites.
That's what Kloppenburg, the judge, wants. So I think we need to put a different person. Vote for the Republican judge. All right? Vote for
Justice Rebecca Bradley. Justice Bradley is a loving and caring judge. She will put an end to the corruption and crime that's going on in our justice system in Wisconsin. She will get criminals off the streets, and she'll protect our constitutional rights. As a just judge, she will interpret the law and not make up laws over the bench.
Good morning and welcome to the program. I'm Vicki McKenna, News Talk 1130, WISN. This is kind of a new low, even for left media, to see the smear that the Journal Sentinel engaged in against Rebecca Bradley. It is 33 paragraphs of an article that, in the end, there's no there. I know that's a cliche, but it's 33 paragraphs to try to get you to think there's something there that isn't there. And it begins with a headline that is offensive and inaccurate. Salacious headline that is designed to generate clicks. The article is confusing and meandering and, almost to the point of absurdity. So it's not encouraging anyone to actually read through it and try to sift through what is garbage and what is not. It encourages people to just simply believe the headline, the false headline, and that's that. And it has been a long time since I have seen a quote news organization be so overt in electioneering against a specific candidate. It has been a while since I've seen something this overt. I mean, I would say it's a few standard deviations beyond the last hit piece the Journal Sentinel generated about her Rebecca Bradley's college writings. Because this was purely designed for smear purposes. A salacious headline, a confusing article, one that nobody really wanted to sift through, to lead people to simply conclude the headline is the entire story. That's yellow journalism. Pretty much textbook yellow journalism. So the Journal Sentinel says Rebecca Bradley had an affair and then engaged in a conflict of interest and tried to unfairly affect the outcome of a case in the courts. It isn't true. She's going to join me in about 5 minutes to talk about this. But let me just read the statement by her ex-husband, which was put out yesterday. His name gets dragged through the mud because of this story as well. Her ex-husband, the person she allegedly had an affair on, sent this out late yesterday afternoon. I am Gordon Bradley. Rebecca Bradley and I were married for 8 years and divorced in 2004. I am outraged by the story in the Journal Sentinel accusing my former wife of having an extramarital affair. Not only is their headline a lie, they knew it before they printed it. I told their reporter Patrick Marley that we were separated at the time of the relationship when he emailed me about it yesterday. They didn't even bother to print my quote. Running a false headline is both malicious and despicable. Rebecca is truly a kind, gracious, and generous person. We remain close personal friends. Our marriage just didn't work out, but we still very much love and respect one another. That's why it pains me to see the state's largest newspaper determined to assassinate her character. The Journal Sentinel has become a pawn of Joanne Kloppenburg and her liberal Madison friends who will say and do anything to tear Rebecca down. And apparently the Journal Sentinel has decided to run a story they are fed whether it is true or not. As a former Milwaukee police detective and one of the people who knows Rebecca best, I urge everyone to reject these outlandish accusations. The best way to reject the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's outrageous behavior is to support Rebecca Bradley for Supreme Court. Didn't even bother to print the guy's comments. Dragged his family through the mud and his name through the mud. Didn't even bother to say, is this real? Is this true? So the justice is going to join me on this for a reaction. This is the way they're going to play it now. The expectation going up until and beyond, certainly, April 5th, is that the supposedly objective, quote-unquote, news organization of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel has just given everybody the sign it's not objective. It's a campaign arm of the Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin, and probably nationally as well. I would expect to see more of this type of behavior directed at other candidates coming up in the upcoming races, the presidential race, the Senate race. Justice Rebecca Bradley is going to join me in just a moment. Welcome back to the show. Justice Rebecca Bradley is standing by on the phone with me to address, now I will call it the latest smear. Maybe the Journal Sentinel could have found a way to contort an explanation of journalism from the first smear on the college writings, but this is pure smear. This is pure smear. Justice Bradley is standing by on the phone. I'm not going to detail the accusations in the article because at the end, Justice Bradley, if you actually read the article carefully, there's no there, is there, ma'am? Good to have you on the show, by the way, and I'm sorry it's under these circumstances.
Thanks for having me on the show, Vicki. I am outraged, and from the expression of support that I am receiving from people all over the state, I know the people of Wisconsin are outraged, too. This article is a vile, sexist, offensive piece of garbage, and the headline is an outright lie, and the Journal Sentinel knew it, and they printed it anyway. It's bad enough that they are trying to influence this election by ridiculous articles about me going out hunting, but this has crossed the line. It is absolutely beneath contempt, and it's unbelievable to me that they are actively trying to destroy me professionally and personally. And I'm a public figure. I'm in the public eye. I recognize that. But this is beyond the pale. To drag people in my personal life who lead private lives into something like this is absolutely disgusting. I have never seen any journalist in the state of Wisconsin go after a political figure like they've gone after me. And I'm not even a politician. I am a justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and they're so blatantly sexist. Every woman in the state should be particularly offended.
What they're trying to do is send a signal to anybody else. We're going to take your family out. We're going to take your friends down with you. This is trying to destroy you and send a signal to any other conservative woman, look what we can do to you. And it doesn't even have to be borne out with data or facts. This is what we're going to do to you. And if you're not going to bail out, if you're not going to flinch, the first 2 times we try to smear you, wait till we sink our teeth into your personal life. You know what this reminds me of, Justice Bradley? This reminds me of a defense attorney trying to drag the sexual history or the personal history of an abuse victim before a jury to try to gain sympathy for her perpetrator. That's what it reminds me of, and I agree with you. It is despicable.
What I think is particularly shocking is this is how the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel is deciding to cover an election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. This is a major, consequential election for the people of Wisconsin, and instead of talking about the real issues in this election, which are the polar opposite judicial philosophies of the candidates, instead of talking about that, the Journal-Sentinel in Milwaukee is talking about who I dated 14 years ago when I was separated from my former husband, what I wrote a quarter of a century ago when I was a kid in college. It's just disgusting. And the Journal-Sentinel, as I told them 2 days ago, ought to be ashamed of themselves.
But they're not ashamed of themselves. This is the way they've decided to play this. They're going to drag out your personal history. They're going to try to beat you over the head with it. And if they can't do it, if there's actually no there there, then they're going to find a way to give people an implication that there is, because they know a 33-paragraph confusing story isn't going to be read and digested carefully by people reading it. They know that their readers are reading the headline and encouraging their readers to make conclusions based on that headline. That's yellow journalism. That's what's going on here right now for the purposes of campaigning for your opponent. But you could not be any different from Joanne Kloppenburg. And instead of going back through court cases, the way judges decide, this is what they're doing. I would like to know why they have never bothered to go through the background of Joanne Kloppenburg's role as a DNR regulator, shaking down small businesses who wanted to pave parking lots, and they'd rather drag out your 14-year-old dating history.
The Journal-Sentinel hasn't written a word about the experience and the credentials, my work in the court system for the people of Milwaukee County, for the people of the state of Wisconsin, my work as a lawyer. They print none of that. They will print nothing about my judicial philosophy because they know that people in Wisconsin, regardless of their political leanings, want a justice just like me, who believes and is committed to always following the law, to setting aside my personal policy preferences, my political inclinations, and always applying the law as it's written, regardless of how I feel about the outcome. They won't talk about the fact that Joanne Kloppenburg has a completely opposite judicial philosophy, that she will, and has basically said as much, impose her personal policy preferences and legislate from the bench. The Journal-Sentinel won't talk about that, but they're going to talk about my dating history. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's offensive. They won't talk about the one thing that matters in this race. They want us. I mean, it is just, it's galling, because the most important thing is, how are you going to rule on the Wisconsin Supreme Court? Isn't that the only question? Isn't that why we have judicial elections? How are you going to view your role on the Wisconsin Supreme Court? Joanne Kloppenburg views her role as a super legislator. That's how she views her role. She said as much in interviews with liberal Madison media, where she said, the reason I went to law school is so that I could use the law to force change. Justice Bradley, when someone says to you something like, I want to use the law to force change, and then throws her hat in the ring to try to be a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, what should we conclude except that she wants to use the law to force change on us?
That's exactly what she said. She also has on her website, and she talks about it publicly. She thinks our job as judges is to promote a more equal society. I've never heard of a more subjective judicial philosophy than that. And she's also said that she follows the judicial philosophies of Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, justices on the U.S. Supreme Court who believe in a living Constitution, that the Constitution doesn't mean what the text of that sacred document says, but that it means whatever she and a majority of judges on a panel want it to mean, so that they can impose their view of what our society should look like. And when we have, God forbid, we have a court composed of a majority of people who think like that, because the people of Wisconsin will lose their right to govern themselves, and they will instead be dictated to by a majority of lawyers sitting on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I'm asking all of the voters of Wisconsin who are listening to me today, do not let that happen.
I want to also suggest she picks Ruth Bader Ginsburg as her touchstone justice. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when asked, what she would look to if she were going to create a constitution, she said she wouldn't look to ours. She wouldn't look to the United States Constitution. She'd look to other countries' constitution if she were going to create some grand document. She said that when she was actually visiting a country in Africa. I mean, that tells you everything. You have been sworn to uphold the United States Constitution, and yet your vision of the Constitution is so, you have such a low opinion of it that you would try to find ways to manipulate it, and you don't even respect it enough to actually understand why it would be the most important document to start with if you were building a new society. And that's Joanne Kloppenburg's touchstone justice. When yours is Antonin Scalia, who is the one who said, even though this ticks me off, what I have to do is what the Constitution says I have to do, and that is just simply call balls and strikes.
That's absolutely correct. And I have a proven record as a Milwaukee County Circuit Court judge, as a Wisconsin Court of Appeals judge, and now as a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, of always following the law. And sometimes people don't like the results in a decision. Sometimes I don't like the results in a decision, in an opinion that I have to write, or a decision that I have to make. But that is my sworn duty. That is the duty of every judge and justice in this state, to always follow the law, even when we'd like to see something different happen in a case. And that is the commitment I have made to the people of Wisconsin since I became a judge, since I entered this race for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I will always uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. I will always follow the law, and I will continue to fight for the people of Wisconsin, because I am the justice they deserve to have on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, not Joanne Kloppenburg.
You know who else has a proven record? That would be your opponent. She has a proven record as a DNR regulator who has used the confusing language of regulation to actually impose her own will against other governmental bodies and courts as a DNR regulator lawyer to simply attack small business. She also has a record. She has a record that, if exposed by the Milwaukee Sentinel, would make people blanch at how offensive some of the things that she did as a DNR regulator were to the little guy, the one that she is, trying to give the impression she cares about. This is just absolutely beyond the pale, Justice Bradley, and I hope sort of people see it for what it is. It's a hit piece. This is a hit piece.
It is a hit piece, and I am hearing the outrage from people all over Wisconsin expressing their support to me. I invite people to visit my website so they can learn about who I really am. My website is justicerebeccabradley.com, and I'm asking people to help out my campaign, to volunteer to help. And the best way they can express their outrage against this trash journalism is to support my campaign for Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Good to have you on the program. Thank you for being able to join me this morning. I appreciate it as always. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We will be right. It's the rule now. The rule is the rules don't apply if you're going to smear a conservative candidate. That's the rule. That's the left media's rule. They have no rules. Now, if the McIver News Service or Media Trackers put out some absolutely just galling false headline about Joanne Kloppenburg, every editorial page in the state would be calling him out. If an organization, a 501 organization, ran ads, smear ads like that, just ads against Joanne Kloppenburg, the Kloppenburg campaign would issue a press release demanding the lie be taken off the air and lean on news organizations or television stations to reject the ads. And those news organizations and television stations would reject the ads. In fact, she already did it. She did it last week, where she claimed that there was an advertisement that had a lie in it, a lie where she's actually quoted as saying, I never said I was tough on crime. That's a lie. I never said it, except that she did say it. So she issues out a press release. It becomes stories across Wisconsin media that she is demanding that this lie of an ad be taken down, except that the ad actually wasn't a lie. But it was a story. How dare you lie about me? Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Sentinel can do not just tell the truth, lie. No outrage from the Kloppenburg campaign. No outrage from the feminists in Wisconsin who would look at that and say, wait a second. Really? You're trying to shame her on her dating life 14 years ago? What does this have to do with the candidacy of this woman? Her accomplishments, what she believes and stands for. But that's not what feminists do. Because feminists are nothing more than the women's wing of the progressive left. So it's okay to trash women up and down the state of Wisconsin or the nation. That's okay. As long as the women you are trashing are conservative women. This double standard has been in place for an awful long time, and it is high time the conservatives reject that double standard once and for all. I don't know why we don't, because every time I see it, it makes me want to put somebody's head through concrete. Metaphorically, of course. Sheriff Clark is standing by on the phone. Hi, Sheriff Clark. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing well. You kind of know what it's like to be smeared, don't you?
For over a decade by that rag, the Sentinel Journal, I've been ambushed and had hit pieces put on me. I'm not surprised by this, but I'll tell you what, it was a powerful interview with you and Justice Bradley, and I think if anything else, this is showing and demonstrating that Justice Rebecca Bradley has the temperament and the demeanor to remain on the Supreme Court of the state of Wisconsin. When you can undergo this type of ambush, this sneak attack, and remain composed like she has, with the grace and elegance that we need from somebody on the bench, there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to backfire on them big time. But like, you said, and Justice Rebecca Bradley alluded to, it's just a shame that there's collateral damage in this to bring in friends and relatives and family and everybody else to have this thing done on a public display. That's why I admire anybody who puts themselves out to serve publicly, like Justice Rebecca Bradley. She didn't need this job. She wants to serve, and but it's a huge sacrifice, and you know that going in. She knows it going in. I think this will have the adverse effect that the Sentinel Journal, who has become nothing more than the propaganda machine, the propaganda wing of the Democrat Party of the state of Wisconsin and of Milwaukee County. They have no credibility left whatsoever, no integrity. And Milwaukee does not need a newspaper who is not going to honor their sacred duty under the First Amendment, freedom of the press, to act responsibly with that power and authority and not use it as a bludgeon to go after people that they don't agree with.
You know what? And honestly, the stuff that is being just shoveled out by the heap load from the left-wing hit groups, funneled through the left-wing hit press is, it's just absolutely galling. But at the same time, when you've got Joanne Kloppenburg saying Lincoln owned slaves, she gets away with saying, oh, I misspoke. I'm not even kidding you. The Journal Sentinel let her get away with saying, I just misspoke on that. You had actually sent me this, a couple of days ago, where you had pointed out that a woman named Wilhelmina Wright, black Minnesota state judge Wilhelmina Wright, called Ronald Reagan a racist and the U.S. Constitution a racist document, and she was just recently confirmed as a federal judge by a GOP-controlled Congress, and not a single hit piece was generated against Wilhelmina Wright. None. This is what Joanne Kloppenburg used her position as a DNR regulator to go after small businesses in the name of fighting global warming. And no one has written a single word about it, Sheriff.
Well, this is the hypocrisy, though, of not only the left. I mean, I understand a political environment, and I'm glad that Justice Rebecca Bradley, pointed this out, that, she's now in the middle of the ring. She's a public figure, and this stuff is going to go on. But you don't expect it from entities that have a sacred and solemn duty to remain impartial. Let's not say neutral, impartial when it comes to this. The editorial board wants to put something out blasting Justice Bradley, as you said, over some decisions she made, a case that she determined. That is all fair game. But for this newspaper and its writers, its columnists, to engage in this sort of unethical, there are no journalistic standards at the Sentinel Journal anymore. But so for them to engage in this, it doesn't surprise me anymore. But like I said, I'm listening to this, I'm paying attention, and I'm watching how the grace, the elegance, the composure that Justice Rebecca Bradley is showing. That's going to be important on the bench, because when you are on the bench of the High Court of Wisconsin, you are somewhat the final say. And you want to make sure that our justices there can wipe away the emotion, wipe away the rhetoric, wipe away all the other nonsense, and look at this thing head on into the Wisconsin State Constitution and the United States Constitution and make a determination consistent with that. But when you get somebody who's an activist, like Kloppenburg will be, the Constitution be damned, she's going to make the law.
You know what? And if you're not a progressive on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you are going to be dragged through the mud. We saw what happened with Justice Ziegler. She was dragged through the mud. I mean, Justice Prosser dragged through the mud. That's what happens. I mean, that is actually what you're sort of teeing yourself up for. If you are a non-progressive on the court, Justice Abramson, who has been, there are so many stories, legit stories you can write about her that haven't been written, has essentially gotten a pass from the press for 25 years. Justice Rebecca Bradley, in order to try to tear her down, they're digging out 14-year-old stories about her dating life, 25-year-old stories about, her intemperate writings when she was a undergrad, 20-year-old college student. I mean, in the meantime, you have not seen an expose on Ann Walsh Bradley's behavior on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, Shirley Abramson's behavior on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. On the court, mind you, you're talking about temperament. You're talking about, having to be able to deal with, people who come at you who you disagree with, versus the conservatives on the court who get barbs and hammers thrown at them and fire bombed, metaphorically, and they always handle it with composure. And Justice Rebecca Bradley has just shown that she can do the same.
Right, and this is what, like I said, this is what goes on, and this is what we're used to. I mean, I don't even get upset at it anymore when it's happening to me from this rag of a newspaper. But I think in the end, because they can't attack her on her judicial experience, her judicial wisdom, and her some of the cases that she's been involved in, because they can't attack her there, they have to do the next best thing, and that is to attack her personally. That's the model they use. They do it every time. Like you said, only when you're a conservative will these left-leaning propaganda rags that are masqueraded in disguise as an area newspaper. But this is the behavior that they engage in. We got to get used to it. We have to stay strong. We have to come out April 5th. If you want to vote early, fine. But we have to come out to make sure that we retain Justice Rebecca Bradley on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court.
Agreed. Thank you for being on the program. I appreciate you calling in.
My pleasure.
Good to have you on the program. The Journal Sentinel, they just, we're the Inquirer. We're TMZ. We're the Perez Hilton blog at this point. I mean, that's the level of standard we're talking about here. Unreal. I got to take a quick break here. Appreciate Sheriff Clark chiming in on this. I'll be right back. Welcome back, 799-1130-800-838-9476. In Wisconsin, the left has shown that if you do not push back against their smears, you lose. You have to fight them. You have to bring it. You have to. You can't just say, well, nobody's going to believe that. That's silly. You actually have to fight, even though things look absurd. There was a story that the media, the Journal Sentinel, and I believe the Wisconsin State Journal generated about Rebecca Bradley. A picture she had of her in, I think it was pheasant hunting. Is it pheasant hunting or duck hunting? Pheasant hunting. And it was the accusation was that she donned blaze orange solely for the purposes of a campaign lit piece because she hadn't started hunting until fall of 2015. And it was a picture of her at a hunt in the fall of 2015. So they suggested that she just put on a blaze orange vest and posed for a picture for a campaign piece. She didn't. She actually went hunting. But we're supposed to think, you were supposed to think, sportsmen were supposed to think, she's not going to be there for the rights of hunters. No, actually, this is a really weird thing that happened in Wisconsin fairly recently. There has been an overt promotion of outdoors and sportsman activities to women. And guess what? Women have gone out into the field, some of them for the first time in their entire lives, only in the last couple of years. I shoot, but I don't hunt. I'm a shooter. I don't hunt. I went pheasant hunting for the first time in, when was it? March or April of 2015. I got pictures of me pheasant hunting. I had the time of my life. But you could have Vicki McKenna would never defend the rights of sportsmen because she only just started. That's what they wanted people to believe. There was another, somewhat less egregious hit piece that was done on Rebecca Bradley. No, she actually went out. She had a blast. Because that's what you want to do. You want to get people into the field because they have a good time doing it. There are people who have never, ever, ever thought about personal protection or guns or anything until the concealed carry law was passed. And a whole bunch of women, for the very first time, went to a gun range, fired a gun for the very first time, took classes, went and practiced for the very first time. Some of them, I remember I was advising a woman who was 72 years old. First time she ever thought about owning a gun. But when Rebecca Bradley does that, it's something to be suspicious about. It is so common in Wisconsin, but somehow you're supposed to be suspicious about it. That's what the news media wanted people to think. How offensive. But you actually have to push back against that. You actually would think, well, people are going to look at that and just think that's just silly. But they don't. They buy it. They believe it. There's a reason why headlines are written the way headlines are written. Because a whole bunch of people don't read the stories. They only read the headlines. And when the headline is salacious and the story following the headline is very convoluted and confusing, they quit reading the story and just stick with conclusions that are encouraged by the headline. Media knows that. That's yellow journalism. They know it. You don't see the same type of attacks launched against liberals. You just don't. But you have to fight every single one of them. Every one of them. I remember one time on this show pushing back against the multitude of false headlines generated when Scott Walker was running in the recall. Scott Walker wants to kill shelter pets. Scott Walker wants to privatize the deer hunt. And the list goes on ad nauseum. And there were so many of them, it was almost, it was damn near impossible to push back against it. They did the same to Justice Prosser. Headlines that were generated based on pure lies about Justice Prosser and a case that he had when he was a district attorney. Because what the media recognizes is that all they got to do is write a headline. And in order to get people to reject it, you have to spend a huge amount of time and effort to do it. And if you have multiple headlines, negative headlines, hit piece headlines generated against candidates, the same candidate, like they're trying to literally carpet bomb, well, figuratively carpet bomb Rebecca Bradley right now before the election, 3 weeks before the election, they reckon, well, you know what? Good luck, talk radio. See if you can beat them all back. And my best guess is that the reporters, the so-called reporters at the Milwaukee Sentinel are just cracking their knuckles right now going, we got more. We got more coming. There's more of the same. You have to always push back against the false narratives. You have to. You can't count on people just being rational and rejecting it. Even as absurd as one of the headlines generated against Rebecca Bradley about sportsmen and gun rights, as if somehow Joanne Kloppenburg, who was a political progressive from the top to the bottom who despises gun rights in Wisconsin, would somehow be a better choice. The woman who said, I became a lawyer so I could use the law to force change. And then who showed she would use the law to force change when she was a DNR regulator, when she was a lawyer working in the environmental wing of the DNR, going after little restaurants who just wanted to improve and repave and expand a couple of parking spaces in their parking lots. It's just, it's the way it is, and we just have not ever, found a sort of silver bullet to deal with an entrenched left press. Just haven't found it. So this is the way it is going to be, unless the new democratization of media, the social media democratization of the information stream is fully embraced by conservative activists who have to recognize you're part of this process now. You can't just let it, fall to the shoulders of talk radio. You're part of this process now. Take to Twitter and to Facebook and go out there and correct the record and make it become part of the information stream. Saturate the information stream.